I should have been at work. Normally, by that time on a Wednesday morning, I'd be halfway through my first round of project meetings, sipping burnt breakroom coffee and pretending to care about the supply chain hiccups. But not today. Today, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring into a steaming mug of fresh brewed Colombian roast, listening to the soft whir of the dishwasher and the occasional creak of the old floorboards upstairs. I didn't know why I was so calm. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was habit. Or maybe I just needed something. Anything. That still felt normal. And for me, that was coffee. I've always loved the mornings. There's something about the stillness before the day starts that gives you a sense of control, like the world hasn't yet decided how it's going to mess with you. When our kids were little, I'd get up before anyone else just to enjoy that peace and quiet. I'd make a pot of coffee, sit at the kitchen table, and just exist. No noise, no expectations, just the warm smell of beans and the sun slowly pushing through the blinds. It became a ritual, sacred in its own small way. After our last kid moved out, the house changed. It got too quiet. Madison started walking around like something had died, and maybe in a way, something had. She said she felt empty, called it empty nest syndrome. I told her it was normal. I mean, come on, we did our job. We raised 4 decent kids who could stand on their own. That should be a victory. But for her, it felt like a funeral. So, I did what I always do. I tried to help. I encouraged her to pick up a hobby, join a class, volunteer, paint, hike, knit. Hell, I would have bought her a greenhouse if she asked for one. I wanted her to feel full again, to feel good. She told me she was trying. She said she was going to start working out more, spending time outside, meeting with friends. I thought, good, this is healthy. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. The thing is, when you've been married for as long as we had, 25 years, if you can believe it, you stop questioning every little thing. You trust. You assume the person who sleeps next to you is being honest, even when your gut starts to whisper otherwise. And my gut had been whispering for a while. She was on her phone more, smiled at things she wouldn't show me, would go on long walks and come back with perfect hair like she'd never broken a sweat, started locking the bathroom door, started getting jumpy when I walked in the room too quick. But I told myself I was being paranoid. I chalked it up to age, boredom, hormones, whatever. I figured maybe I wasn't doing enough. Maybe I wasn't saying the right things or taking her out enough or noticing her new haircuts. I started leaving her notes. I bought her favorite wine. I even cleaned out the garage just so she wouldn't have to see the mess every time she did laundry. I was trying. She wasn't. The coffee tasted especially good that morning. Smooth, a little nutty, with just the right bite at the end. I made it the way I like it. French press, real grounds, no shortcuts. As I sat there with my hands around the mug, I looked out the window at the driveway. Her car wasn't there. That wasn't strange on its own. Madison had said she was going to run errands, which could mean anything from picking up prescriptions to buying a throw pillow she didn't need. That's how it had always been with her, vague but harmless. Or at least I thought so. The table was clean. Spotless, actually. I had scrubbed it myself the night before after dinner. Chicken and rice, nothing fancy. She barely touched her food. Said she was tired, had a headache, and went to bed early. I stayed up watching reruns of that show we used to love. Laughed at the parts we always laughed at. It didn't feel the same. I noticed her perfume lingered in the kitchen longer than usual that morning. Stronger, sweeter, like she'd put on too much, or maybe just enough for someone else to notice. That should have hit me harder than it did, but it didn't. I just kept sipping my coffee. There's something cruel about how calm the world looks when your life is about to change. The sun still comes through the blinds like it always does. The birds outside still chirp. The coffee still smells like home. Nothing screams at you. There's no siren, no warning. Just silence. Stillness. Looking back, that stillness was the loudest thing in the room. And then, without knowing why, I got up from the table, walked to the sink, and poured out the rest of my coffee. I stared into the empty mug like it might give me an answer. It didn't, but I had a feeling I was about to find one. Earlier that morning, I left for work like I usually did. Keys, thermos, quick nod to Madison, who was still upstairs. I was running late, nothing new. Backed the truck out, took the turn a little too fast, and right as I got to the end of the street, I realized I'd left my briefcase in the garage. The only reason it was in there in the first place was because of Diesel, our cat. He's a little orange troublemaker we picked up from a shelter a few years ago. For some reason, he likes curling up on the engine block of my truck if the hood's even the slightest bit warm. And I mean every single time the temperature dips below 60. I'd opened the hood that morning to chase him out, set my briefcase on the floor while I was bent over the fender, and forgot it when I slammed the hood closed. So, I turned around and drove back. That briefcase didn't even have anything urgent in it, just my planner, some contracts, a few invoices for upcoming projects. Nothing I couldn't live without. But for whatever reason, I decided I needed it that day. As I pulled into our driveway, the first thing I noticed was the police cruiser. Black and white, parked a little crooked, right up close to Madison's side of the driveway. My stomach dropped. The first thing that ran through my mind wasn't suspicion. It was fear. Something had happened to her, I thought. An accident. A break-in. My wife had collapsed and called 911. I don't know. My brain scrambled a dozen things at once. I jumped out of the truck, didn't even close the door. I ran to the front door, fumbled the keys, pushed inside, and then I froze. The house was quiet, mostly. But not the kind of quiet that means everything's okay. It was the kind that tells you something is off. I saw her shoes by the front door, her purse on the hallway table. But what hit me like a punch to the gut was the pile of clothes on the living room floor. Hers and someone else's. Her jeans. Her blouse. A man's uniform shirt. His utility belt, badge and all, laid across the arm of the couch like he lived here. I walked forward in a daze. Every step felt like I was dragging a cinder block behind me. I didn't call out. Didn't shout her name. I already knew. I could hear them. The sounds came from upstairs. Not muffled either. Loud. Rhythmic. Voices that didn't care who heard. And not just voices, her voice. Madison. I can't even write all the things she said. I'll never forget them, no matter how many years pass, no matter how many times I try to drown them out with noise or prayer or whiskey. She was saying things that shattered me. Things no husband should ever hear his wife say. And the worst part? She said my name. Not to me, but about me. Like I was nothing. Like I was an old coat she'd left in the closet while she showed off something shiny and new. I didn't go upstairs. I couldn't. My legs didn't work. My body said stay grounded. So I did. I went to the kitchen. The coffee pot beeped. Still warm from earlier. I hadn't turned it off. I leaned against the counter, staring at the table, at the empty chair where she usually sat. And I just stood there. Listening. Breathing. Not breathing. I don't know. I felt like I'd walked into a version of my own life where none of the rules made sense anymore. My house wasn't mine. My wife wasn't mine. My name wasn't even mine, just something she used to prop up someone else. I noticed my hands were shaking. Not violently. Just enough that I couldn't keep my fingers steady on the edge of the table. I tried to pour myself a cup of coffee, and I spilled a little. It hit the floor, and for some reason that little splash was what made it real. Not the sounds, not the clothes, not the cruiser out front, but the coffee on the floor. There was something about seeing that little brown drop on the tile that made it all snap into place. I don't even know why. I stood in that kitchen like a ghost, like a man waiting for the earth to open and swallow him. I thought of our wedding photos. The vacation we took to Big Sur. The mornings she used to laugh at my jokes when we were both brushing our teeth. The times I held her when she cried over her mom passing. The long talks about what we'd do when we retired. I thought about everything, all at once, and none of it felt real anymore. Everything I ever believed about our life just came apart in that moment. I didn't yell. I didn't bang on the wall. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, watched the steam rise from the mug, listened, and I died a little. I stayed downstairs. I didn't stomp up the steps or bang on the door or start yelling like a madman. My chest felt too tight to yell, and my legs were made of sand. There was no righteous fury, no big movie moment. Just a weight behind my ribs that I couldn't lift. I was still leaning against the counter when I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling a little, but I managed to open the camera. I set it down on the granite beside the coffee maker, propped up against the paper towel holder, and hit record. I didn't know what I was doing. I don't think I had a clear thought in my head beyond, you need to remember this. You need proof. Maybe part of me still didn't fully believe what I was hearing. But the sound of her voice, that didn't lie. It cut through every doubt I had. It was her. It was Madison. And she was up there saying things that didn't just hurt. They hollowed me out. I stood there, leaning over the edge of the counter, staring at nothing, listening to my wife of 25 years tell someone else how much better he was. Word for word. You're so much better than Daniel. And then the one that made my stomach turn. My weak little husband could never make me feel like this. I gripped the counter so tight my knuckles went white. I think I held my breath for a full minute before I had to let it go. My eyes burned. I blinked hard to keep the tears from falling. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the kitchen, went down the hall, and turned into the downstairs bathroom. The door barely clicked shut behind me before I dropped to my knees in front of the toilet. I threw up so hard I thought my ribs might snap. There wasn't much in my stomach. I'd only had half a piece of toast that morning and a mug of coffee. So it came out bitter, mostly liquid, and left my throat raw. My eyes watered. My chest heaved. And when it was over, I sat there on the cold tile floor, arms hanging over the toilet, heart pounding in my ears. I wiped my mouth on a washcloth and looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize the guy staring back. Eyes red, jaw clenched, skin pale like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. Maybe I was looking at what was left of the man who thought he had a good marriage. I splashed water on my face. It didn't help. When I got back to the kitchen, the sound from upstairs was still going. Like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just lost the ground beneath my feet. The phone was still recording. Still capturing everything. My voice didn't matter anymore. They were giving me all the confirmation I needed. They weren't just being unfaithful. They were cruel about it. Like I didn't matter. Like I was some joke. And here's the thing. I'm not a violent man. I never have been. I've never raised my hand to anyone, not even in high school. I'm not built for chaos. I like order. I like calm. I fix things. I build things. I pay my bills. I don't cause trouble. But I'm also not stupid. And I'm not blind. On the corner of the kitchen table, right next to my half-empty coffee mug, was my father's pistol. An old .38 he'd left me when he passed. It wasn't fancy. Black finish, solid weight, walnut grip, classic as they come. It was legal. Registered. I kept it unloaded in a small safe under the stairs. I only brought it out maybe once a year to clean it and make sure it still worked. It wasn't a weapon to me. It was a memory. A piece of the man who raised me. A man who stood tall and never broke under pressure. It was sitting there now because I'd taken it out a few days ago to oil the parts. I'd meant to put it away, but life got busy. I'd left it on the table, thinking I'd lock it back up after dinner. I'd forgotten. The safety was on. No rounds in the chamber. But I still glanced at it like it meant something more now. Like it belonged in the scene, even though I had no intention of using it. I sat back down at the table. Same spot as earlier. Coffee was cold now. The smell still hung in the air, warm and bitter, mixing with something sour in my nose. I rested my elbows on the table and tried to breathe. Upstairs, Madison was still laughing. Gasping. Making noises I hadn't heard from her in years. Maybe never. My ears were on fire. My chest was stone. All I could think was, how long? When did I stop being enough? Who was this woman upstairs? The sounds didn't stop. They just kept going. And I just kept sitting there. Not moving. Not speaking. Listening. And dying all over again. Eventually, the noise upstairs started to wind down. I sat at the kitchen table, still staring at the cold mug of coffee, hands wrapped around it like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The walls had stopped shaking. The voices were quieter now, just soft talking, muffled giggles, occasional footsteps. Then, through the silence, I heard her voice. "What's that smell?" Madison asked. There was a pause. It was my coffee. She knew that smell. I've made it the same way every morning for years. Rich, dark roast. Strong enough to wake the dead. She always said she could smell it the second it started brewing. Said it was her signal to get out of bed and start the day. She must have known I was home. I didn't hear a response from him, Travis, that's his name, but I could hear the energy shift. Fast. Movement. Footsteps. Drawers sliding open. Closet doors slamming. Dresser drawers yanked out, then slammed shut again. The sounds of urgency. Chaos. A dozen feet scuffling across hardwood in every direction. Panic had hit them. I didn't move. I sat right where I was, elbows resting on the table, watching the doorway that led to the stairs like it was the finish line of some awful race. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Maybe the worst of it had passed. Or maybe I'd just gone numb. They came downstairs together. Wrapped in sheets, like something out of a cheap motel scene. Madison's face went pale the second she saw me. Her breath caught in her throat, and she stepped back instinctively, bumping into the man beside her. Travis didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His eyes went from me to the pistol still sitting on the table, then shot immediately toward the couch where he must have left his own weapon. It wasn't there. I spoke calmly, almost like I was reading a weather report. Your boss stopped by, I said. Took your service weapon. And your backup. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His face drained like someone had pulled a plug in his neck. He looked around the room like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. But this was no dream. He muttered something under his breath. Madison looked at him, confused, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was locked on me. Truth is, I'd made the call about 20 minutes earlier, while they were still upstairs. I had Sergeant Hallbrook's number because I'd met him once at a community fundraiser Madison had dragged me to. Travis had been there too, shaking hands, smiling for photos with kids. Hallbrook answered after one ring. I told him calmly what was going on. I gave names. I explained everything I'd seen and heard. I told him exactly where his officer was and what he was doing. To my surprise, Hallbrook didn't argue. Didn't make excuses. He said, I'll be there in 20. Don't touch him. Don't touch anything. Just sit tight. He arrived in 15. No lights. No sirens. Just parked down the block and walked up like he was making a house call. He came in, nodded once, saw the pistol on the table, and asked, Yours? I nodded. Licensed. Safety's on. You planning on using it? No, sir. He nodded again. Good. We'd hate to arrest the wrong guy. Then he asked where they were. I told him they were upstairs. Still occupied. He didn't go up. He just pulled out his phone, hit record, and let it sit on the table next to mine. Audio and video both. I didn't say a word. He didn't either. He sat with me, arms crossed, listening, not reacting, just letting it play out. When the voices died down, he picked up his phone and stood. He looked around the room, spotted the officer's equipment, and gathered it quietly. His face didn't change. He didn't lecture me, didn't ask for explanations. Just did his job. Then he walked outside and called in the patrol car. Said it was being used off-duty under false pretenses. Said it would be towed. He left before they came down. That's what made it all the more surreal. Travis looked completely lost when I said his boss had been here. Like his entire world had just been yanked out from under him. Madison looked from him to me, and for the first time, she realized she didn't understand the rules of the room anymore. She didn't know who was in control. Neither of them said a word. They just stood there in silence. And I stayed seated. Travis got dressed as fast as he could. He barely spoke. Fumbled with his uniform like a rookie on his first day, trying not to make eye contact. His face looked sunburned with shame, even though there wasn't a lick of sunlight in the room. He kept looking at the table where my dad's pistol still rested beside my coffee mug. I didn't reach for it. Didn't touch it. But I left it where it was. He didn't ask for anything. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. Just wanted out. And I let him go. No yelling. No threats. No drama. Just the sound of the front door closing behind him, quiet like a curtain falling at the end of a sad play. Madison stayed. She stood in the middle of the kitchen with the sheet still wrapped around her like it could protect her from the truth. Her arms crossed under it, hair wild, face pale. She wasn't crying yet, but I could tell it was coming. And when it came fast. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she started with the oldest trick in the book. It didn't mean anything, she said, voice soft like she was trying to calm a wild animal. It was just, I don't know, a thing, a hobby. I don't know what made me laugh exactly, but I did. A short, sharp, bitter laugh, more like a bark than anything else. It cut through the air like a buzzsaw. Her eyes snapped up. That laugh did something my silence hadn't. It scared her. Really? I said. A hobby. She took a step forward. Daniel, I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. I shook my head slowly. You think this just happened? You think all that upstairs was some kind of accident? No, she said quickly. I mean, yes, I know it was wrong, but you've been so distant lately. The house is so quiet. I just needed someone to feel alive. Alive, I repeated. I wasn't shouting. My voice was even. Calm. I think that made it worse. Then I pulled my phone from my back pocket. You want to know what's real, Madison? I said. I filmed it. Everything. The voices. The words. All of it. Her lips parted. Nothing came out. I sent it to the kids, I said. Her knees buckled, like someone kicked them out from under her. She caught herself on the counter, the sheet falling off one shoulder. No, you didn't. I did. Why would you? How could you do that to them? I looked her dead in the eye. You did this to them. I just made sure they saw the truth. My phone buzzed in my hand. I didn't have to look. I already knew who it was. Brooke, our oldest, had replied to the email. Her message was short. Just 7 words. Tell me you're joking. Please, Dad. I stared at the screen. The message blurred for a second, but I didn't cry. Not then. I just turned the screen toward Madison. She looked at it, then turned away like it burned. You should get dressed, I said. Your parents will be here in about 20 minutes. She stared at me in disbelief. You called my parents? I did. They're coming to get you. She sank down to the floor, back against the cabinets, sheet pooling around her like someone pulled her plug. She didn't look at me anymore, just curled up and muttered, "Oh God. Oh God." I leaned against the opposite counter, arms folded. By the way, I added, your new friend's wife? Works with you. She looked up slowly. Executive assistant to your CEO, if I remember right, I said. Real nice woman. Her name's Rachel. Madison's mouth opened again. Still no words. She has the video, too. Her whole body seemed to deflate. I watched her sit there, on the tile floor where we used to laugh and cook and argue over takeout. A place that once held memories of little feet running by, of holiday dinners and birthday mornings. Now it was the backdrop to ruin. I'd printed directions for her, had them folded on the hall table, ready for her parents when they arrived. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to fight. I wanted her gone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. But everything I said landed harder than a scream. She didn't try to argue again, just stayed curled up, saying nothing, tears sliding down her cheeks like someone had left the faucet running. I sat back down at the table, picked up the cold mug of coffee I never got to finish, and took a sip. Bitter now, left a sting in the back of my throat. Appropriate. She didn't look up again, and I didn't offer a hand. I filed for divorce the same week. Didn't wait. Didn't hesitate. The minute the house was empty, I drove straight to the office of Jillian Marks, a local attorney I'd met through a friend at the VFW. Jillian had a reputation in town. Tough as nails, sharp as a tack, and never the type to tiptoe around people's feelings. She wore her hair pulled back so tight it looked like it could snap, had a voice like gravel in a coffee can, and carried a yellow legal pad like it was a sword. When I walked into her office and laid everything out, what I saw, what I heard, what I recorded, she nodded once and said, "We're going to bury her." I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to ruin anyone's life. But I wanted out. Clean. Quiet. Final. Jillian got right to work. We had everything we needed: footage, audio, timestamps, call logs, even Travis's service schedule. I printed screenshots of the texts I'd found after Madison left, ones I hadn't seen before, but made the picture even clearer. She'd been meeting with him for months, making plans, making jokes at my expense. There wasn't much left to explain. Madison didn't fight the divorce. When she got served, she didn't call, didn't send a letter. Her lawyer reached out to Jillian, and that was that. No begging, no denials, nothing but legal documents and a handful of weak responses. I think part of her knew she had nothing to stand on. I'd caught her in the act, and not just once. I had proof. Hard, undeniable proof. At the first hearing, she showed up in a gray pantsuit I'd never seen before. Hair done like she was headed to a job interview. Her eyes didn't meet mine. I could see her shoulders hunched, her jaw clenched. She looked tired. Not physically, necessarily. More like someone who hadn't slept right in weeks. Her lawyer did all the talking. They tried the angle I expected. Said she'd felt neglected, that I'd withdrawn emotionally after the kids moved out, that she'd felt like a ghost in her own home. It was a carefully rehearsed story, delivered in that gentle, we're all human tone. But it didn't land. Jillian responded with dates, records, emails. She didn't even raise her voice. Just laid it out flat. The timeline made it clear Madison hadn't drifted, she'd planned. Not once. Repeatedly. Intentionally. With an officer of the law who should have known better. The judge didn't say much. Just took notes. Flipped pages. Nodded once in a while. When it was done, he looked up, gave a brief summary of the ruling, and said the words I'd been waiting to hear. I would keep the house. She would pay monthly support. Funny how life works. Madison used to tease me for not making as much. She had the better salary, fancier job title, more polished shoes. I always let it slide. It never bothered me. I wasn't insecure about money. I worked hard. I provided. That was enough for me. Now she's funding the rest of my life, at least for a while. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in years. No drama. No yelling. Just paperwork and a judge's signature. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that actually felt good for once. I went home, sat in the garage, and stared at the lawn. The same lawn I'd mowed every Saturday for 20 years. Same patches of crabgrass I could never quite get under control. Same view of the oak tree where the kids used to climb until the branch cracked. That tree still leaned a little to the left. I never got around to fixing it. And I didn't plan to. I took 2 weeks off work after that. Told my boss I needed time. He understood. Didn't ask questions. First thing I did was drive to the bait shop off Route 12. Bought a new rod. Mid-range, graphite, solid grip. Nothing fancy. Picked up a tackle box too, even though mine was still in the shed. Felt right to start fresh. Then I drove out to Miller's Pond, the one my dad used to take me to when I was a kid. Sat in a folding chair with a sandwich, a line in the water, and the sound of wind through the trees. That was real peace. The kind she could never fake. The world kept turning. Bills still came. Grass still grew. But something inside me had finally stopped grinding. The tension in my chest, the knot in my stomach, it was gone. Not healed. Not forgiven. Just gone. I went fishing again the next day. A few weeks went by. I kept my distance. No contact. No updates. Not a single word between us since the day she left the house with her parents and the directions I'd printed out for them. Then I got the email. It was short. Just one line. No greeting. No subject line either. Can we meet? Please. I just want to talk. I stared at it for a while. Read it a few times. I didn't answer right away. I let it sit in my inbox for a day and a half before I replied. All I wrote back was, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Clover Cafe. My booth. I say my booth because it was the same one I always sat in. The one near the window, back corner, where I'd eaten breakfast alone for years on Saturdays when the house was still full of kids and noise. It was where I used to go to think. Same waitress, same chip table, same seat with the loose spring underneath. She was already there when I walked in, sitting with a cup of tea she probably hadn't touched. Her eyes flicked up the second the bell on the door jingled. I could see the nerves in her hands. She had both wrapped tightly around the mug, like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I took a breath, tipped my hat to the hostess, and slid into the booth across from her without saying a word. She looked smaller. Not thinner, really, just diminished. Like guilt had taken up space under her skin and pushed everything else out. Her face was drawn, her eyes dull and tired. She wasn't wearing much makeup, and her hair was tied back loosely, not like the polished version of herself I was used to. We sat in silence for a minute. She tried to smile. It didn't land. Thank you for coming, she said, finally. I nodded once. No reason to make her more comfortable than necessary. I needed to see you, she said. Face to face. I know you don't owe me anything, Daniel. But I needed to say something. I didn't stop her. She kept talking. I messed everything up, she said. Her voice was quiet, but not whispering. Just tired. Honest, maybe. I can't stop thinking about it. About what I did. About how I treated you. I replay it over and over. I wish I could take it back. She looked up at me then. Her eyes were wet, and her lips were trembling. I still love you, she said. I never stopped. I lost myself. And I hate what I did to you. I would give anything to go back. Anything. I sat there and let it settle. Let the weight of her words land. Then I spoke. You don't get to undo things just because you regret them. Her expression broke right then. A crack ran across her face like a pane of glass finally giving way. Her shoulders slumped, and she reached for a napkin. Blotted her eyes. Tried to keep herself together. I know, she whispered. She looked at me again. This time not with pleading, but with something heavier shame. Do you forgive me? She asked. It hung in the air between us, thick and uncomfortable. I didn't rush to answer. I wanted to mean what I said. I don't hate you, I told her, carefully. But I don't believe you ever loved me the way I loved you. She closed her eyes at that. Like I'd hit her without raising a hand. She didn't argue. She didn't try to justify it. Just sat there, silent, breathing through the tears now freely running down her face. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, but then she closed it again. The waitress walked by and gave me a nod. I lifted a hand, signaling I wouldn't be staying. No need for coffee today. Madison didn't touch her tea. She just sat there, staring at it, like it might offer her a way to go back in time. I stood, took my coat from the hook, slid my hands through the sleeves. She looked up one last time. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I turned, walked out the door, and let the bell jingle behind me. I didn't look back. I finished packing up the rest of my things on a Thursday morning. The house was quiet. Not in the awkward or tense way it had been in the weeks after everything happened. This was a different kind of quiet, clean, final. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a heavy quilt. I moved from room to room, checking corners, wiping down baseboards, running my hand across windowsills I hadn't thought about in years. It's strange, the details you notice when you know you're leaving. The din in the hallway from when Tyler crashed his scooter into the wall. The pencil marks in the pantry showing the kids' heights year by year. Madison had stopped updating them after our youngest hit high school. I stood there for a while looking at those little lines. Didn't say anything. Just looked. Most of my stuff was already boxed. What was left fit in the back of my truck. Some tools from the garage, a few framed photos, my fishing gear, and the old coffee can that held all the extra screws, bolts, and batteries I never threw away. I'd always meant to organize it. Never did. Before I left, I set a manila envelope on the kitchen counter with a note for the realtor. House keys, garage opener, final meter readings. I left the front blinds half open so the place wouldn't look empty from the street. I sent Madison a message on her work phone. Nothing dramatic. Just said the movers would be coming by on Saturday to pick up the last of her furniture. Asked her to make sure someone was there to let them in. I didn't sign it with anything. On my way out of the driveway, I paused for a second and looked back. The lawn had grown a little longer than I usually let it. I figured she hadn't been keeping up with it. The hydrangeas along the fence were still blooming, though. Funny how nature just keeps going, no matter what. I pulled out onto the road and rolled down the windows. The breeze felt good. It carried that smell of late spring cut grass, warm asphalt, distant charcoal smoke from someone grilling a few streets over. I turned on the radio, found a familiar station. They were playing a song Madison used to hum in the kitchen while making breakfast on Sundays. A soft country tune, nothing fancy, but it always stuck in my head. I didn't skip it. I let it play. Drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the open window. I thought maybe the song would hit me harder, bring out some ache or sadness I hadn't dealt with yet. But it didn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. People say betrayal changes you, and I believe that now. It's not about becoming colder or tougher. It's about learning what you'll carry and what you'll leave behind. I used to think love was about holding on, no matter what. Now I think it's just as much about knowing when to let go. I didn't scream. I didn't tear the house apart. I didn't fall into some hole I couldn't climb out of. I just lived through it. I put one foot in front of the other, packed my things, made my plans, and kept going. I've still got a long way to go. Still got to figure out what comes next. But for the first time in a long time, I don't feel stuck. I pulled onto the highway and let the wind do its thing. My fishing rod was in the back, and I had no real destination, just somewhere quieter, somewhere with water, somewhere I could think. The sign ahead said, "Next rest area, 23 miles." That sounded just fine. And for the first time in a long, long while, I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I didn't owe anyone anything. I was free. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think a cop who betrays someone like this can still be trusted on the job? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.